breaking news in this past hour. Crowborough residents, they've applied for a judicial review against the Home Office.
A quiet town in East Sussex has become the latest front line in Britain's protest season. Not because Crowborough is looking for a fight, but because national policy has arrived on its doorstep. It starts with a decision from Westminster. The Home Office plans to use Crowborough Training Camp, a Ministry of Defence site, to house around 540 male asylum seekers, with the first arrivals expected in January 2026. And once a place like Crowborough is told this is happening, something predictable follows. People come outside, they don't start with fire, they start with questions, and when questions don't get answered clearly enough, the street becomes the meeting room. It's Sunday morning and Crowborough looks like it usually does. Small town traffic, winter air, people moving toward town with hands in pockets. Then the signs appear. Then the clusters form. Then it becomes clear. This isn't a single gathering. It's part of a sequence, because by mid-December, Crowborough has already seen multiple marches, with reports describing the latest as the 6th protest since November. This is what local concern looks like when it refuses to stay local. No one needs to be bussed in for a town to feel cornered. They only need to feel unheard. The issue at the centre is specific and simple to describe. The Home Office wants to move asylum accommodation away from hotels and into other sites, including military facilities. Crowborough Training Camp is one of the sites earmarked. Another site mentioned alongside it is Cameron Barracks in Inverness. The government's argument is familiar. Hotel use is expensive, politically toxic and hard to sustain. So alternative accommodation is being expanded. The town's argument is also familiar, REC, and just as emotionally charged. We were not consulted, we don't have the infrastructure, and we're being told to absorb the consequences. That is how the temperature rises without a single brick being thrown. By late morning, the march has a shape. You can feel it in how people walk. Not scattered, but purposeful. Not rushing, but steady. The kind of pace you see when a crowd believes it has been left with only one lever: visibility. Local groups have taken the lead. One of the names repeatedly tied to organising and legal action is Crowborough Shield, which has been linked in reporting to fundraising and requests for a judicial review. And that detail matters, because once a protest shifts from complaint to legal strategy, it stops being a one-off, it becomes a campaign, and campaigns don't go away after one weekend. They return again and again until something changes or until something breaks. Crowborough is not a city built for constant demonstrations. When a march moves through a town like this, everyone feels it. Drivers reroute, shop fronts watch, residents step outside just to see. Police plan for not just today, but the next one. And the closer the calendar gets to January 2026, the more the question sharpens. What happens when arrivals begin? That's why the street keeps filling. Not because people love marching, because time is running out. The local authorities have been pulled into the centre of it. Wealdon District Council and Crowborough Town Council have publicly addressed the issue, including organising communication around Home Office plans and public engagement. And that's another turning point, because when councils and residents are publicly aligned in opposition, even if for different reasons, it gives protesters something powerful: legitimacy. It signals this isn't just a few angry people. This is a dispute between local governance and national decision-making. Then there's the land itself. That Crowborough sits beside the Ashdown Forest, a protected landscape with deep local attachment. The conservators of Ashdown Forest have acknowledged awareness of the proposed use of the camp, and that there are community concerns about potential impact. You can hear it in the conversations on the pavement. Some are worried about services: doctors, policing, transport. Some are worried about the environment. Some are worried about safety. and some openly sure worried about identity. Those are not the same argument, but they stand shoulder to shoulder in the same march. That's what makes these moments volatile. One route, many motives. The Home Office's own framing emphasises management and containment. A government fact sheet describes Crowborough Training Camp as providing basic safe accommodation designed to be as self-sufficient as possible, and notes the site was previously used for transitional accommodation connected to the Afghan resettlement effort. So, you have two competing realities. A Westminster's spreadsheet reality. Beds needed, hotels to phase out, sites to repurpose. Crowborough's lived reality. A small community being asked to carry a national burden with local consequences. And when those realities collide, protests stop being symbolic, they become practical, because a town can't debate capacity in the abstract when it's the town itself being used as the container, and this isn't happening in a vacuum, and that context is the fuel. A Financial Times report on the broader policy picture described the Home Office moving to use military sites as part of the shift away from hotels, noting the political sensitivity and the way hotel accommodation has been associated with protests. It also cited figures showing over 36,000 asylum seekers in hotels and record asylum claims 110,051. Those numbers don't just sit in a report, they filter down into public conversation as pressure. Pressure on housing, pressure on councils, pressure on policing, pressure on trust. And when trust is the thing under strain, crowds don't need much to mobilise. They only need a location. Crowborough has become that location because it represents something larger than itself, the way asylum accommodation sites turn into flashpoints, where ordinary residents, activists, political groups and national media all converge on one patch of ground. And with every march, the story expands. What begins as "we weren't consulted" grows into "who is in control?" That's the moment local complaints become national marches, not because the town is huge, but because the symbolism is. There is also a darker undertow that authorities watch closely, the risk of escalation and infiltration. Reporting on the Crowborough situation has noted preparations for further protests and the possibility of far-right involvement or attention. A reminder that once a location becomes nationally known, it attracts groups that were never part of the original community concern. This is how protests evolve. Stage 1. Locals. Stage 2, regional supporters. Stage 3, national groups arrive. Sometimes to support, sometimes to provoke, sometimes just to feed on the attention. And once you reach stage 3, the protest is no longer owned by the people who started it. It becomes a platform. That's when policing gets harder, not because crowds are bigger, but because intentions become mixed. Some reporting from earlier Crowborough demonstrations described chants and slogans that go beyond policy criticism, including anti-asylum messages and even speakers encouraging measures like patrols or withholding council tax. Whether most marchers endorse that or not, the effect is the same. When rhetoric shifts from protest to self-enforcement, authorities start to treat it differently because the fear isn't just disorder, it's vigilantism. And the moment any community begins flirting with "we'll handle this ourselves," the temperature spikes fast, not just on the street, but inside the police briefings and council meetings. Now zoom out for a second, because this is what the country is watching. A government promises to reduce hotel use by moving people elsewhere. A town says the elsewhere is us, and we were not properly brought into it. Legal action is discussed, fundraising grows, marches repeat, and the clock moves toward January. That's the chain. Not a single dramatic incident, a sequence, a slow build, pressure that keeps stepping forward until it finds a boundary. So what happens next? If arrivals begin in January 2026, the test won't be whether the camp can hold 540 men on paper. It will be whether the institutions around it can hold the town. Can the Home Office maintain order and transparency? Can local services cope, not just once, but for months? Can police keep protests lawful without turning the town centre into a permanent standoff? And can national politicians avoid using Crowborough as a symbol in a wider culture war? Because once that happens, compromise becomes politically expensive. Crowborough is not just arguing about beds, it's arguing about trust. And once trust becomes the real issue, no fact sheet fixes it. If you value calm, careful reporting over ragebait headlines, subscribe and stay with us, because Crowborough is not the last place Britain will see this pattern. And the next chapter won't be written in Westminster, it'll be written on the street